Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name's Alison Watts. I'm from the Southern Cross Postgraduate Association. I'm very pleased to be hosting this session for students today about finding casual work for postgraduate students. I've posted the link to become a member in the chat box, and I guess also I should talk about next week, which is the final careers workshop we're doing with Beck, which is careers for HDRs and PhDs that may be thinking outside of academia. So I'll post that link in as well. Well, that's enough from me. Over to you, Beck. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And also I was just thinking, we should have had Sharon here for next week.
Yeah.
Might be our co-host.
Happy to.
So my name.
Maybe touch on some of that stuff for you today, Beck.
That would be really, well, I guess, there'll be so many, our PhD students will be listening. They want part-time work as well. And also, so whatever you would like to share would be really helpful. So my name's Beck Brown. I'm happy to be here, work in conjunction with the STU Postgraduate Association and STU Careers. Probably at the end of this session, I'll after we've got had some time with our beautiful guest, our first guest speaker today, and it's Sharon Nesbitt. She is at the Star, and she's been down there since
January.
And I don't know what her new job title is, but I'm going to pass it over to her without further ado. We won't keep her precious time, and we're absolutely rapt to have you here, and thank you for coming along. Over to you with a beautiful background.
Thanks, Beck. Thanks for the invitation. Yes, this is our new branding at the Star Entertainment Group. So that's our logo. We've gone for purple. It's not the Cadbury purple, so please don't write to Cadbury and tell them we're using their colour. We're not. I think the idea of the new branding was to introduce a bit more fun. We'd been silver, we'd been gold, actually, gold and black. Yeah, so it's been kind of interesting watching the way that that branding has happened. I'm currently on leave from my role at Southern Cross University as a business and tourism lecturer, or academic, senior lecturer actually. And I moved to Sydney in January of this year. I had applied for and accepted the role that I have now, which is Learning and Development Manager, Leadership Centre. So my role is designing, delivering and evaluating learning initiatives for what we call levels of work 1 to 4. That basically means middle to senior managers. My colleagues look after learning for onboarding or induction, and also learning for frontline and junior members. The Star Entertainment Group has 3 properties, soon to be 4. One will be kind of decommissioned. We are a group that has 18 hotels, 37 restaurants, and 2 theatres across 3 sites of the Star Sydney, the Star Gold Coast, which many of you would maybe know, and Treasury Brisbane, soon to become the Star Brisbane. And that's our, where a lot of our focus is at the moment across the group. In fact, the focus is spread across the group. It's spread between the growth that's happening as we start to amp up to launch and open the Star Brisbane. We're going to recruit an additional 8,000 team members for that property. We have commenced recruiting the senior managers across food and beverage, events, hotels and gaming, and slowly we're moving through corporate. And then right early in the new year, we will begin commencing our frontline employees. So there's a lot of opportunity in that space. The other main focus for the group really is on what we call remediation. Our license to operate a gaming venue a casino was taken away by the New South Wales state government about this time last year. And since then, we've been working very hard to address all of their concerns. There are a number of inquiries to address all of their concerns around, I guess, undesirable and illegal activity and the processes that were not tight enough to make sure that those kinds of actions didn't happen. What that means for the group is that we're also employing a lot of anti-money laundering financial crime specialists. So there's a lot of those roles in banking in particular, and we've certainly we've doubled the size of that team from about 45 to just short of 100. There's 99 employees now in our AML and fin crimes team. That's because there's a lot of cash. And there's a lot of financial transactions generally that take place across all of our properties. So a lot of growth in that space as well. So if you do have skills in that area, have a look at our careers page. So that's kind of broadly a little bit about the STAR. There's a lot of work happening in that remediation space, and of course growth as well for the STAR Brisbane, which is about to open.
So just a question, what does remediation mean?
That means reviewing and rectifying all of our processes to make sure that they are fit for purpose and can pass scrutiny by the regulator. Wow. There's so much jargon in this role. I was surprised moving out of higher ed. The jargon is insane. So many acronyms to get on top of and to learn. Everything from SOPs, which are standard operating procedures, every single one of those across the group has been rewritten. ICM, internal control manuals, which are aligned with those. So there's a lot of really technical, detailed, functional work that's been happening in that space, because we believe that we've done what's required and that we are working towards what's required to get our license back to operate in New South Wales. We're on notice in Queensland, but we're also going to equally lift our standards up there. So it's a super interesting time to join an organisation, and it has not been without its challenges.
And what have you been enjoying? What is starting it? So students at some point, our postgraduate students, they'll transition to part-time work, or they'll transition into graduate roles, and of course it's you've been through that sort of arriving and settling in. What have been some of the highlights for you in those early stages? And suggestions, perhaps a double-barrel question here, suggestions for how you've managed yourself through these challenges as you've settled into a new role.
Yeah, thanks, Beck. It's an interesting question. In the beginning, it was a little bit hard to find the joy in the role because it was so chaotic as a consequence of that program of work that was happening. There's also been a restructure and a series of redundancies. The joy, though, has been for me in the connections that I've been able to make with other team members, finding those individuals who within your immediate team, and then perhaps slightly more broadly across the group function, who that you have something in common with, that you can go for lunch with. We've now got to the point 9 months into my role where we formed what we call Stair Club, and we have a lunchtime exercise group for going out and about. So I think looking for those people who can support you, I guess, socially throughout the day, just say hello and invite you for a cup of coffee, and vice versa, of course. And then, of course, leveraging those connections to get your work done, and to leverage those, and to meet other people that can help you get your work done as well. So it's very much been about the people, the highlights. That's also been one of the lowlights as well. But that's okay. You can't expect everyone in such a large organisation to you can't expect to have an immediate connection with them. Some interpersonal relationships take a lot of time, and as hopefully most of the students who listen to the recording will learn about, in personality and job fit and these kinds of things. It takes all types. I try to focus on where I can find common values as well, and look to those people.
Nice. And I mean, there's a term that I often hear you use, and I'd love it if you'd share. You've touched on it, really, is social capital.
Yeah,
that you talk about in your organisation.
Yeah, so social capital is. Social capital is really, I guess, again, I guess I did just touch on it, those connections that you can make, those people that you know, that network that you can leverage and can grow. And I guess when you're new to an organisation, you have very little social capital. Whereas at Southern Cross University, where I'd worked, not exclusively, but almost for the previous 20 years, I had a lot of social capital, although it was within small groups. I wasn't necessarily well linked across faculties, for example, but within my own faculty and the previous incarnations of that, and certainly through to with relationships with professional staff as well. That was there. It's incredibly important to recognise and work on building your social capital within an organisation. And I think that is not to say that you can't get your job done by looking people up on the staff intranet, working out who you need to be reaching out to and reaching out to them. But working on building those relationships tends to make that easier, and you build trust more quickly as well. People, if they know you already, have some kind of pre-existing, have had some contact or some kind of working relationship, they trust you more quickly. They're more likely to give you what you need, so that the resources or the answers that you need, so you can get your work done.
Thank you. They're really, and it kind of has brought a few other things that have come to mind, and we'll go into some of the, if you've got a few minutes a bit later on, is talk about some of the things like, cover letters, resumes, and searching for work and things like that. But you've touched, it's reminded me of a few other things. We've been running these workshops for about 12 months now, and it's been really interesting, the feedback that comes back from our postgraduate students about things that they're worried about, things that have, and I've been surprised. And one of the things, two things that I've learned recently from the postgrads is that one postgrad in particular, an international student, really struggled once she was in the workplace, and it would be the same part-time, and then how to actually do what you have just said about, like, how does that, because it for her culturally, it wasn't something that she was in a different culture. She didn't know how to really go about socializing and approaching other people. She wanted to do it. She knew she needed to do it, but she was saying to me, how do I do it?
Yeah.
Like, what? I mean, for someone like you, I guess it comes naturally, because you have such a sort of, you're open, and you always tell me you're an introvert, but I always say you're an extrovert.
Around you, I'm an extrovert. Situational.
It can be so nerve-wracking, being in a new job, can't it? And
it's super challenging. And I know you and I talked about what I was experiencing. You've been a great support, which has been wonderful. So having that person outside of the organisation who's a great friend, a fabulous colleague, can invoke some kind of mentoring. You're a brilliant coach as well. That's been helpful. In terms of the little things, though, that you need to do to build those connections, I would add that don't be hard on yourself. It's really difficult. It's more difficult when you're working in environments where there is a strong work from home culture as well. So with those kinds of caveats, I would say, try to make sure you're going to work on those days where the most people are there. Push yourself to be there. It can be really uncomfortable being in the office when there's actually very few people around. It's more comfortable actually when there's more people around, harder to get work done. I endeavour to go in a minimum of 3 days a week, and I've basically given over my Tuesdays to social events, to making sure that I prioritise offers of coffee, offers of lunch, our stair walking group. I definitely prioritise those activities, because I think they're as important as smashing out a report or getting through a backlog of emails. In saying that, don't undervalue also the really brief, fleeting connections that you can make with people. A chat in the lift, a chat in the kitchen at the coffee machine, just some small talk. It's a lovely day. Are you having a great day? Is a great way to start. You'll understand fairly quickly whether the person that you make those really light quips to is interested in chatting further. And then you can get into the other, I guess, elements of what your role involves. I'd also recommend that everyone has an elevator pitch. It's a difficult thing to develop. It can sometimes feel weird using it, but sometimes you don't need to use your whole elevator pitch. Sometimes you can just pull out parts of it. You build a story about yourself, about who you are, where you're from, what you're doing, and perhaps where you're going and would like to go as well. And you can use elements of that to drop in to those interactions.
Nice. There's some really good tips in there. And it is awkward. It's uncomfortable. And I think the other couple of things that I just want to touch on that you have said is the working from home thing. And this will be relevant for Alan and perhaps, in IT. I'm not to assume that just because you're in IT, you're going to be from home. But for, so many roles into the future and that idea of being seen. And I always think about that hanging around in corridors because there is a lot of value, but it is, it's so much easier to go cruise around the house in your socks and your jump and getting suited up. But also what I've observed is that when you go into the office, you actually feel better, even, just being up, and there's people talk about well-being and work well-being and about getting suited up and doing your hair and, and getting geared up and getting out there. It is nice. It's warm and fuzzy to be at home. It's lovely. But I have to say the same thing, when I'm on campus, it's those interactions with others and those little touch points and just being able to share differently. But I also think for your profile and for raising your profile and keeping, my father's always, I try not to sort of talk personally, but my father's always says you have to be seen.
Yeah.
You have to be seen, always.
Yeah.
As like his one thing, you need to be seen. So
there's that saying, isn't there? Out of mind, out of sight. Yeah. And it's true. I also run the graduate program. We've got I have 9 grads at the moment across 3 different streams, and I can see this play out with the different grads. I have 4 grads in IT, and we have a massive, as you can imagine, IT function. It's called sitting under the and with really interesting, so just a massive diversity of interesting roles, and the 2 of the boys in IT, well, actually one of them in particular is based out of our Brisbane office, but he works from home a lot, and that has been clearly a detriment to him, and his lack of visibility combined with his massively introverted personality have led me to question his suitability for the organisation. And that's before I even get to his technical skills. In some ways, they don't matter. But if there's 2 boys and 2 girls in the IT program, graduate IT stream, and the girls are doing, I think, probably much better because they have better social skills as well. So that's, I guess, another element at play in this visibility and then in this kind of small talk piece.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. And I think you've raised that point, and it's a really nice segue, I guess, for how to find part-time work, looking for part-time with some of that success around those technical versus employability, those other skills. Do you mind just quickly, because, we talk about these terms all the time, do you mind just quickly sort of highlighting those employability skills that increase people's their employability, increases their employability, your interest, engagement, enthusiasm, willingness to work with, etc. Well, actually, by the way, too. Do you mind just sharing what some of those things, so that we can really highlight that for all of our students, and so that we can see technical versus employability?
Yeah, I think the communication skills, when you always look at the top 10 list of, what employers want type skills, communication skills is always way up the top. If you're not a naturally vibrant, kind of vivacious communicator, if you're not an extrovert, I guess, that can feel like a challenge, but it's not. Communication is not just being loud and talkative. It's also being responsive to written requests, to your emails, to your chat requests that come in. It's making contributions in meetings that are thoughtful and timely. It's actually also turning up on time. It's poor if you are late to a meeting. Now, I know that doesn't really fit exactly into a communication type bucket, but it certainly does affect your personal brand, and it does affect the way that people think about you. So being on top of your emails, I know there's plenty of literature that says don't be a slave to them, but we want to hear back from you, yeah? Particularly if it's your supervisor or your colleagues in a project group, you definitely need to stay on top of that. And it doesn't matter whether you're education or IT or science, that remains really important. So there's a whole host of transferable skills, and I think really, in my opinion, they trump everything. And this period of time that I have been at the Star, absolutely working in a people and performance function, with that graduate program, absolutely proves that. I'm seeing that those, people notice, basically.
Interesting. I think you've raised some really interesting points around timeliness and responding to emails, because that's actually something that, and I guess it's different styles of the way that we communicate these days, and communication often seems to be, it's transactional. So people won't respond sometimes if they don't, there's no need, but that back and forth, that politeness,
yes.
and that continuous connection, they're tiny little incremental, saying thank you, thanks for that, or follow up, actually starts to build those tiny little nuances that happen, not just, like you say, the loudest person, the person that talks the most at the meeting. Thank you. You've touched on some.
I would add, actually, being an active listener as well. Simon Sinek has a fantastic video online. He's very prevalent online. Simon Sinek, the leadership coach, but it's called The Art of Listening. He has a 5-minute YouTube video that I recommend everyone watch. And there's 4 things that you can do when it comes to listening that can really enhance your communication ability. So it's not just waiting to send your message. It's about how you receive other people's messages as well.
Would you mind just writing his name into the chat box?
I can probably go one better and pop the link to the video in there. Hi, Mo. Nice to see you.
2 seconds. I just want to take one step further with that point that you made about meetings, visibility, and then talking too much versus talking too little. And sort of amazing example recently of being in a very big online meeting, different people, coming in. And I heard recently that the most confident, I think I shared this with you recently, is that some of the science around the way people are perceived is not necessarily the person that speaks the most in a meeting. And it is what you said about value, about the value of the contribution, not just, speaking to speak. And I think that was a real, and I saw this example of a colleague do it beautifully in a meeting. And I've watched him in a couple of other meetings, and he hangs back, and then he only, that thing, if you've got nothing to say, don't say anything. But also, if you're too quiet and say nothing at all, and that beautiful balance of what you've just said. So thank you so much. You've shared some really perhaps things that we don't just come up in these conversations. And we also have the love. Are you happy to hang around for a few minutes?
Yeah,
Oh,
just before I be silent, I'm just going to pop the link to Star Careers in the chat as well. We employ a lot of international students. 49% of our workforce actually speak a language other than English at home, or at least have, multiple languages. So it's something, and we employ a lot of student visa types as well. Now, it may not be the role that you're studying for, as we went to earlier, but the internal mobility opportunities within the group, we are about to double our workforce to 16,000 people, are massive. So I'd certainly encourage everyone to at least have a look if you are within commuting distance of our Gold Coast or particularly Brisbane properties, Sydney, of course, as well, which is in the city centre. The benefits of working at the Star include in Sydney, $10 a day parking, free meals, and your uniforms are laundered as well if you're wearing a uniform. So there's lots to like about working there.
Nice. Thank you. Just one, could you just explain what internal mobility means for students, just so that they can kind of get a sense of what that really can look like for them?
Yeah, so internal mobility is the opportunity to move from an existing role to a new role within or across different functions. And certainly most of the people who have been at the Star in my broader team for a long time started as frontline workers in gaming or hospitality. There are a lot of ex-dealers working in what we call corporate functions across the group.
Fascinating. I can't believe it got to 9:30 and I was only having you here for half an hour, and that's why Mo's here. Oh, thank you. I'm incredibly grateful, Sharon. We didn't do what I planned to do, but I'm also conscious that, that the YouTube, that the last one that people loved the most was the one that, I wasn't sitting here with the slides. We were talking about real stuff, real things that are happening for people, and real issues, rather than me kind of talking. So I'll do the slides at the end. Thank you. And I'll talk to you. So you're welcome to hang around, but I know you gave me your 9:30 slot. Thank you. Have a great day. I love the purple. You can tell them I didn't think of Cadbury.
Great to see you, Sharon. Yeah.
And welcome. We have Mohit here from Study Gold Coast. Yay!
How are you?
Oh, I'm really good. I'm happy. Some of my I always like to. I've got a crew of people, but I just feel so excited to have both you and Sharon here today. We've got we had somebody here, somebody else here earlier. Pop back out. We've got Alan here. He's doing a master's in IT. And so I'll just hand it over to you, Mo. We've been talking about, so today the session is about part-time work. But Sharon and I have just had a pretty informal conversation about what it's like starting a new job. Those feelings that you have, and we've been talking about employability skills, we've been talking about visibility at work, but I'll just let you introduce yourself. I know that Study Gold Coast is booming. I see your post, so I'd love to hear what you're doing and what's happening there, and what's your new role.
Sure. So thanks for having me. Beck, it's been great actually, and always look forward to sessions like this where I could engage with fellow, SCU students. So again, just a bit of intro. So yeah, my name is Mo. I'm originally from Mumbai in India. I actually studied and I did my master's in international tourism and hotel management at Southern Cross University in 2014 and 15. And since 2016 onwards, I've been working with Study Gold Coast. And just recently, Study Gold Coast is now part of a much bigger organization called Experience Gold Coast. So the council, so Study Gold Coast is, just to introduce the organization as well, Study Gold Coast is the peak education and training industry organization for the city. and we are also a destination marketing organization for the city. So we promote and position the Gold Coast overseas as an ideal education destination. And we are fully funded by the city of Gold Coast. Now, this year in January, the council announced their intention to amalgamate five council-funded institutions in the city into one new super company. So Study Gold Coast, Destination Gold Coast, which is the tourism destination marketing body, HOTA, which is Home of the Arts, which is the arts center, Placemakers Gold Coast, who run the Bleach Festival, and also Major Events Gold Coast, who look after, Pacific Air Show or Cooley Rocks On or Blues on Broad Beach or whatever. So these five companies from 1st of September this year operate now as Experience Gold Coast.
Oh, so you don't even talk about, do we still say Study Gold Coast, or do we just say Experience Gold Coast?
I think we do still operate and retain the brand of Study Gold Coast, but going forward, what I'm sensing is there will be a lot of amalgamation of entities and brands. But as far as overseas is concerned, we will continue to operate as Study Gold Coast. Because then I think our partners or students need to understand Experience Gold Coast is too broad. But yeah, so that's the new company and the new positioning. So yeah, that's a bit about the organization. Did you want me to dive into my experience as a student at SCU and how?
Yes, because you also work part-time, and I'm also conscious of, and we've got quite a few more IT students. I imagine there's a whole bunch of IT roles underneath that amalgamation that would be happening.
Absolutely, huge. Yes. So I think we've gone from, so Study Gold Coast when I started in 2016 was a team of 4. In 2016, June, or the council increased their funding to us. And now we are a team of 14 of us. We necessarily, as Study Gold Coast, have never had in-house IT support, but we've always worked with a company called Mercury IT, which is based here on the Gold Coast, and they look after all our IT needs. Now, in saying that, Experience Gold Coast will have, including
Mercury
us,
for any of our...
Mercury IT. Yes.
Oh, Mercury IT. Thank you. That's great, because I'm conscious that we've got more IT students coming. We had one last week, and so I'm really wanting to build my own suite of those that are really active in the region. Right.
So there are 2 companies that we are pretty familiar with. So one is Mercury IT. It's quite a massive company, provides a lot of IT support to a lot of companies like us. There is another one called Cloud Voice and Data. So that's another one.
Yep.
So basically what will now change though for us in terms of opportunities, especially for students who are in IT or ancillary fields, is Experience Gold Coast is now a company having over 250 plus staff, going from just Study Gold Coast having 14. So it's a much bigger company, and then Experience Gold Coast will have in-house IT. It's too big a company to have outsourced IT support. So basically, so I think there's definitely that. But then I think going back to my personal experience, I would think when I was studying, I think a lot of opportunities I feel come in so many different ways. So I think building your experience can be done in so many different ways. Casual job, part-time jobs is definitely one. I was heavily involved at the university student association level.
That's right. Yep.
So I think there is a lot of opportunity.
Just arrived, sorry.
No, that's all good. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, I guess, to create things or start things when you're in that university environment. I remember we collaborated with SCU Live Ideas. I believe that platform is still ongoing. So I
collaborated. What did that look like? So because I'm conscious that these are really interesting and really important, and not the kind of normal everyday tips. What did it look like? What did it look collaborating with Live Ideas as a student, as an international student here based at the Gold Coast? What did that look like for you?
So I think, so one thing was, I remember what we were able to do was realizing, and I think this is where if you have an entrepreneurial streak, it's perfect. University is an amazing sandbox to try things. So I think we realized at that time, the university, especially our Gold Coast campus, did not have a debating society.
Right.
So we actually reached out and worked with Coasters, which is the student association on campus, and really built up from the ground up a debating society called Smartinis. I'm not sure if it's still active, but we had a 3.5, 4 year long run that I was particularly still involved in. Again, working with faculties in the university, getting different people from the industry to debate on topics, having students participate as well. So I think that was one good idea. By doing that, I was able to actually make connections with the industry and all the speakers that would come and argue for and against. So I think that was one unique way to do it. And I think it was aligned with my passion to also debate. So I think something like that also to keep in mind that that could happen. In addition to that, something like Live Ideas. So I think Live Ideas is a platform where if there is a startup project, if there is a volunteering opportunity, if there is something the council wants to float, I think Live Ideas allows people to share those projects on that website actually. And you can then find something that you want to get involved in and reach out to the project lead and say, hey, I've got some time and this is in line with what I'm studying. And I would like to consider applying, and that conversation could really just carry on from there. But I would say those two opportunities for sure. And then obviously part-time and casual jobs. I remember working with you, Beck.
How you, because when you came out, you'd had plenty of work experience. I recall in India. However, you still came to the Gold Coast. You didn't know and so not all, but many students want to find part-time work. What did you do?
So I think so I'm actually a sommelier by training. So before I came and started my studies here in 2014, I used to live and work in England for some time, and we got trained as a sommelier. So I'm still a sommelier, but it was hard to find something in that same line of work here on the Gold Coast. Yeah, because it's quite niche. So, and I think the Gold Coast in 2014 is quite different to the Gold Coast now. So I feel like at that time, the opportunities and the scope of it was quite limited. So it took a lot of time, required a lot of persistence to really wait for some.
How long did it take? Just so we can kind of also manage expectations around what is a long time, what is a short time? How long do you say?
Well, I remember my studies, I think I started at SU in February, and until March or April, I really wasn't looking at working or finding work. I just wanted to get familiar with the academic system and things. But then I started looking in March, end of March-ish. But then it took me all the way until July to find something that was relevant to my field of study. So I think that job I'm referring to, Beck, is the one with the Marriott.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So that one actually came through one of the careers events that I think the team, the careers development team, is that what we are calling them?
Yeah, I'll talk about SCU careers at the end. So
yep.
Session is hosted in conjunction with the Postgraduate Association and SCU careers, and I work really as a conduit facilitator between the two.
Right. Yeah, because I remember at an event on campus, I actually met the HR head of the Marriott, and that conversation actually started from, hey, if you're looking for a job like this, keep an eye out on this website, and here's my LinkedIn, and stay connected. So I just sent a courtesy message to her and said, thanks, it was nice to meet you. And then, just maybe because I've been on top of her mind, because of that, she actually sent me a link saying, we've just advertised 3 positions. So if you're interested, apply.
Well, you've got to be in it to win it, don't you?
So I feel like that kind of connection and being at the right place at the right time, also to meet the right person. Not that she gave me a job. She just told me it was open for application.
I'll come back to that because there's actually a theory called happenstance, and we think that lucky people are just lucky, but they're not.
Yeah.
You did something. So I'll loop back to that. Yeah, carry on. So you meet this lady, you come to an event on campus, you chat, and you express you do your elevator pitch, you tell her what you've done.
Yep, that's right.
That connection. She's got a job coming, and she reached out to you.
That's right, on LinkedIn, as a message saying, hey, the positions have been advertised and we are looking if you're still looking. And that was just amazing. And I applied for it. I got shortlisted, I got interviewed, and then on my birthday, I find out that I had gotten the job. So that was fantastic.
What was the first role?
It was just a guest service agent, not a sommelier role, but it was a guest service agent, so F&B assistant at the all-day dining restaurant at the Marriott, which is now a JW Marriott, which is the first in Australia to have that title. But yeah, so that was the role, and I think worked with them in that capacity. It was perfect because I didn't want to work more than 15 or 20 hours a week anyway, to balance my study commitment.
Thank you. I'll just interrupt you for 2 seconds. That's a really nice balance, and know that it is a different world to 2000 and what was that, 2017 or 14?
14, yeah.
Things are harder, things are more expensive, but balance is, finding that balance between your studies and, it's a constant juggle. But 20 hours, I remember you were still working really hard, weren't you? Because you were working and studying. But
that's right. That's right. And I was living right next to the university, opposite. You could see my accommodation from building B, level 10. But so I think that really helped. But I guess now I would assume, considering the economic activity that has boomed over these years, especially post-com games, there are so many more opportunities that did not exist back in 2014. That's how I see it. So I think obviously, yes, there is probably more competition, but then at the same time, there is more economic activity to support that as well, I guess. So I think that really worked for me to just get a foothold into that space, get a work opportunity that is aligned with my studies. So I think same way for an IT student, I would guess, to really keep an eye out for those events where IT industry professionals hang out, and potentially attend or request to attend an event. It will be very unlikely that someone will say no unless it's an invite-only limited, unless they have valid reasons. But mostly I've seen people are very friendly and welcoming towards students attending an industry event because they really want you to be a part of it. Yes. So I think something like that would really also pan out for someone, I guess.
Thank you, Dandan. Do you mind just typing in the chat box what course you're doing, just so that we can help and add any value wherever we can and weave some of that into discussion. We have a number of students enrolled in for this that got the link for this session that we listened to the recording. So shout out to you guys, business students, education students, early childhood. Yep. Yeah, great. Okay, cool. So I can talk to that point after Mohit. So there was a few things that I just thought of in what you have shared, and one of it doesn't necessarily have to be the case all the time. But getting a brand name, I think, is really helpful, isn't it? Like getting something that people are familiar with. If you're going to go, across the globe, back home or to another part of the world, it can be really helpful. But I'd love to just, while I've got you here, touch on what happened, because also I know that Dandan and Alan will have the opportunity to do professional development for the workplace, a unit in the postgrad, and then he'll have an elective to do internship. And I know you did internship. And Dandon, she will have formal placement as part of her. And our MBA students that are, and then there's mostly they were MBA students that were enrolled. So all of those students have the option to do internships. So I think although this is about part-time work, I can loop back to some of that part-time work. But given these guys are doing placements, part of your story, we'll just take a little side swerve. Tell me what happened after you're working at Marriott, and then how did all of that go?
So I think throughout the rest of my duration of my course, I was working at the Marriott in that part-time capacity. And then I think like I always had this goal and intention to try something different than just hospitality, because I've already done that for a while, and then I was ready for something fresh. In 2015, so this is the other, like, just to my point earlier, that experience could come in so many different ways.
Yeah.
In 2015, I actually found out about a program called the Mayor's Student Ambassador Program. Now, that is something, so just a disclaimer, that's a program we run, Study Caucus runs.
You can do a promo for that. Benefits for us.
Yeah. So the Mayor's Student Ambassador Program so that's what I found out about that program through the SCU International Office. At the hub, there were flyers lying around. Picked one of them up, and I asked the team, and I said, hey, like, this sounds interesting, because the program essentially says you apply. If you get appointed by the mayor of the city, you get access to industry and government, and experience the Gold Coast in an exclusive way. Sounded like something I would want to be considered for. Applied for it in 2015 January. February, I found out I have been successful, and then I think that program really opened so many doors for me. So 1 year that program lasted. At the end of that program, I had been so familiar with Study Gold Coast. Study Gold Coast runs that program, by the way, and then realized that, well, I'm studying tourism. Study Gold Coast is a destination marketing organization, so it is one arm of that tourism kind of sphere. And then I asked the team at Study Gold Coast at the time if they were open for me to do my internship, which is a requirement of my course, at Study Gold Coast.
That's great.
Yeah. And they had never had an intern before. So they were hesitant because they had nothing to fall back on, or they had no baseline, or they had no idea how to do it. So then luckily, I think, and Sharon actually earlier who just spoke, was my lecturer for the professional development unit. So then I actually brought this back to her, and I said, hey, they have concerns. I'm really keen to do it. And then they had a quick call with the team, and they said, look, we can actually support you with this. And then the CEO of Study Gold Coast at the time, she said, okay, let's do it. So I did my 3 months internship with them. Now that internship actually made me realize that I wanted to be involved in this space, in international education space. It is still part of tourism in that sense, and global movement and humanities and all this. So that internship turned into a full-time job at the end of the internship, because just then we had indications that we would get more funding. So the company was really willing to not let me go and lose that kind of investment they made in me. And they asked if I wanted to work. And then I just, accepted that opportunity. And then since January 2016 to now, I'm working with them.
Wow. And do you mind finishing up and sharing with us two things? I'm conscious that not everybody will be international students, but I'm conscious everybody loves to know how you came to be staying here in Australia. And the other thing is, what have been the highlights in the last 6 years in the role that you're in? So let's start with your highlights.
I think so many things. I feel like I've had the opportunity to make some real changes in how, and I think real positive influence on the quality of student experience possible on the Gold Coast. So in my role right now, I'm responsible for essentially the student experience in the city. And my team and I, we really are passionate all about it. We've got a good mix of, domestic and so former domestic and international students in the team. And I would say the first one was how we've evolved the Mayor Student Ambassador program to what it was when I was a participant to now. So for example, back then it was only for international students. Now it is for international and domestic students. Back then it was heavily leisure focused. Now it is heavily professional development and social responsibility focused. So those changes. So we've made the program a bit more inclusive. Back then you could only have one student per institution, limiting how many students could be considered. We've changed that. The other big impact or the highlight, I would say, is the opening of the Gold Coast Student Hub here in Southport.
About that, thank you. I was hoping you'd talk about that. I was thinking about this morning. I was like, oh,
yes.
I'd love him to talk about. And I'd seen you, and this is an interesting thing about LinkedIn. I mean, I've seen it via LinkedIn. So I'd love you to share because that will be relevant, no doubt, for everybody.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. So I think the Gold Coast Student Hub, actually just yesterday, we were presenting to Universities Australia Network, which is Australia's peak university representation body, on the Gold Coast Student Hub, because last month we celebrated 6 years of Gold Coast Student Hub. We opened it in 2017 August. So here's the numbers. By now, we are at 65,000 student visits to the space from 110 institutions, from 132 nationalities. That's amazing. Yeah. So also to keep in mind, there are only 4 such facilities in the country. 2 of them are in Queensland. 1 of them is here. And I wouldn't be wrong in saying ours is probably the most engaging one. Study Perth has the newest one. It's probably a little more flashy, but I feel like ours is more grounded and very highly engaged. For the students here who are online, I would really recommend you to follow us on Instagram. The activity on that platform is absolutely phenomenal. And it's really, the Gold Coast Student Hub is your space for you to use the way you see it fit. So
yes, what do they do in there?
You can come and study if you want to, there's free Wi-Fi, there are workstations. It's not designed like a library. It does not look clinical at all. It's designed to reflect the aspirations of today's, students. It's a retrofitted building. It's a heritage building. It's very cool. There is a student support service in there, which is by appointments. It's free. You can discuss anything confidentially with our support officers who can speak 11 languages.
Wow.
So there's a whole lot of things. There's community integration opportunities, amazing stuff.
So good.
I've shared the website in the chat. So
I'll just pop it up on the screen now so that people can see it. So it's Gold Coast, www.goldcoaststudenthub.com. And Sharon has shared a couple of other links there. One about the art of listening, and to the star careers, where there are opportunities certainly for our IT students, but also our tourism students, our MBA students, and also would still be relevant for our education students, because we don't necessarily have to, and that was something that Sharon brought up, to be really binary, so really singular about what we do. Just because we're studying education doesn't mean we can't, explore professions while we're moving through different stages of our career, work, life cycle.
So I've also shared, relevant to this conversation around part-time jobs or job opportunities, another link. So our team also runs the Gold Coast Student Jobs platform. That's a dedicated student jobs website from the city. So our team actually vets every single opportunity that gets listed on it. To make sure they're all legit, and they are all, if they're unpaid internships, then they're genuinely valuable in other ways. So our team vets all these opportunities. At the moment, there are about 750 plus opportunities listed on it. So there'll definitely be a lot of things around IT on there. Early childhood is childcare, and that's in such demand right now, that
Right.
sector for workforce. So
Beautiful.
have a look at that website, please. Yeah.
I must have kind of intuited, because maybe I'd seen you loading it somewhere, and I mean, it's just perfect, because I think that's one of the things that I'm so conscious of, particularly for our international students or people that are new to the Gold Coast, or just generally students in general. It's a big ask to get people to kind of go on to Seek, and they're advertising for everybody, and then they're competing against everybody. And then also we do have jobs that come through SCU Careers, and this is not a criticism, it's just the way that it is. Some of them can be Australia-wide, and so I love that this is it's for students, it's Gold Coast. I love the vetting, and I just think that is the most brilliant piece of news. And I must have kind of intuited somewhere. I think you posted about it recently on LinkedIn.
Yes. Yeah.
So brilliant. Thank you. I've just left it up there. I'll close it down, because it's filled, for me, it's filled a little bit of a gap, because I think about what finding work really, we tell students, network, do this, talk to people, talk to your landlord. It's not that easy for everybody, and we all want to have a bit more of a passive approach. But having a passive approach by sort of lying on our backs and looking for a job on Seek, casting very wide,
Yeah.
So I like that this is that it's still passive, because it is not confrontational in terms of having to go onto campus and speak differently. You still have to go through, of course, the recruitment process, but it's a lovely segue, because I'll talk about some of that formal stuff, and we might I'll take we just finished taking half an hour of your time. It's a segue, because I think what we'll do is we'll go on. Are you happy for me in the second half of this session to go on to there, and I'll look at some of the jobs, because I want to talk through about what then it would look like.
Yep. So definitely not a problem. Before I leave, I just wanted to
about how you came to be here, and anything to share. I'm just conscious of your time.
No, of course. No, just one thing I wanted to mention, because it's an internal thing still. It's not been promoted yet.
So the jobs.
So there's an event that is taking place on the 18th of October that we actually have just locked in yesterday, which is why it's still not live for public at the moment. But 18th of October, Wednesday, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., we are actually going to host a hospitality and tourism recruitment evening at, I need to see, the location is not finalized, but it is, yep, but there will be about 15 to 20 employers who have job shortages or job opportunities, and students are encouraged to bring their latest CVs, go to that event, have a chat.
Brilliant. Because again, I think that we kind of fill that long path between sort of being someone that's here, domestic or international, and then finding that beautiful, filling that pipeline, I think is where we can do that.
Of course, yeah.
That's brilliant. When you the full details or a blurb or something, because I don't think there's any. I work through the business faculty in postgrad and undergrad. There in professional development.
And I will be reaching out to you back as well via email once that actually is locked in with the full details. We would love to share it through you.
Because I just had a group of they were undergrad yesterday, and but some of those are fantastic students that are they're getting ready to look for part-time work and or placements.
Yes.
So my question, because I know you have to go back and do your other tell me, this won't be relevant for everybody, but I know that the thing that comes up so often for students is pathway to residency here in Australia. Perhaps share, what would you say are your top few tips on how do you get through that and get to where you want to be?
So I think, yeah, so it's very interesting because this space in the past, only until recently, we were not, encouraged to speak about, but things have changed over the last year. And now considering
who were because of
because of the nature of the expectations out of us and yeah.
Okay, that's fair call. All right.
Yeah. But in saying that, over the last year, it has changed because the government has had a very pro mobility approach.
Right.
So I think that's great. So I think a few things to keep in mind in that as well is, I think, especially, like, I'll just talk to a university student perspective. And I think if a permanent residency or a migration through to any other visa or any other pathway is in your broader scheme of things, like, there's nothing wrong and with that, and there's nothing to hide either. And because I do know a lot of international students with that, they would have that kind of perspective, just because while you're on a student visa, before you get a student visa, you have to submit a genuine temporary entrance statement, in which you have to write that you're going to leave after you finish your studies. So in saying that, I think in your own interest, I think while your studies are going on, I would say, if that remains your first priority, then you do good justice to that study phase and that university phase, then moving on to the right sector to get that work experience, to then continuing into that journey through to whether that's a permanent residency for you, and beyond. So, like, that's definitely possible. We at the Gold Coast Student Hub, only starting this year, have started conversations on this with our students. So we invite a few MARA registered migration agents. So MARA is the body that vets all the migration agents in the country. So the Department of Home Affairs, which handles immigration and citizenship, they recommend that if you want to get advice from anybody on any migration pathway related concerns, it's best to go to a MARA registered agent. You can actually find this on their website. You can put your postcode and it will actually tell you who is near you. So it's pretty transparent, that website. We at the Gold Coast Student Hub host this session once a year on having these agents. Students can ask any questions they want. We also have someone from Department of Home Affairs who can also further validate that conversation. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, Beck.
No, it does, because I know a few of you guys that have navigated, and it's been a very different experience for each of you. And so some of the formalities of it I haven't really known, and also because the few that I've known, experience has been so different based on, and I haven't felt certainly clear enough in myself to be able to give. So if somebody were wanting to, so for example, we've got a few postgraduate students that have just finished last term, and there's a few that are finishing up soon. Would you suggest that they connect to the Study Gold Coast Hub? Would that be the way to sort of start getting some of that assistance that they need?
So I think the best way would be to, because at the moment we don't have anything scheduled.
Oh, okay.
So what the best way would be, if they're graduates, if they've already graduated, because the Gold Coast
graduating soon. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So while they are still a current student, they can access the Student Hub. They can book an appointment through our support service. Our support officer can help them refer to the right organization. The other good thing to do would be to go on the MARA website. I can share it with you here.
That would be great, because that's the one that collects the best, the very
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So this website you can use to help your research. And then in addition to that, so this is something, now I can't endorse any particular group, but Facebook,
that's a government site, isn't it,
yeah,
Mark?
yeah, that's a government site. So that's the one I can really like endorse, and we can really go for that. Facebook is another option. So on Facebook, just with your own research and judgment, there are groups relevant to different visa types.
Right.
Right.
Oh.
So people who are either considering to apply for a particular visa, which might be a permanent residency or a temporary work visa or whatever, there is groups on Facebook for different visa types.
Wow.
Try and submit like an expression of interest to join one of those groups, because in that you will find conversations going on between people that will be relevant to you, and they will be answering questions. Someone will be asking questions that you might also have.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was really useful.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a fabulous place to finish. I'm conscious we need to take a break. Thank you. That's been incredibly helpful, Mo. I really, really appreciate it. I love having that time to connect with you. And I'm excited about the information, the links that you've shared. I'll just pop them back up on the screen so that people can see them. So we've got the Gold Coast Hub, and then we've got the Student Jobs site, and then the government body for information around
migration agents.
Yeah, migration agents. So it can be a bit of a minefield in terms of going through that process. So to have some sort of formal guidance around that is really helpful. Great. We're going to take a break. I will connect with you again so soon, Mo. I know it was short notice. We had somebody else, and I try to share on my love around. Like, oh, she wants me to come again.
No, always happy to connect.
So great.
Yeah.
I love having you guys here live as well. So we'll just take a short break. If you're at home, just pause the, actually, in fact, I'm going to press pause on the recording. We'll be back. We'll be back in 8 minutes. And thank you so much for your time, Mo. Have a wonderful weekend. And I look forward to catching up with you soon.
I'm sure we'll catch up soon. Take care. See ya. Bye.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome back to the second part of this session on finding part-time work. We have had always good fun, a little bit of technical issues, so I won't be showing you the slides today, but I'm going to talk through, and Alison's kindly put the link to this fabulous, we put it in the earlier part of this session, an incredibly much needed resource for students on the Gold Coast. We were talking about, how as facilitators in this space, how we, work towards closing this gap between both employers and, educators and career development teams in this space. And Mo kindly shared with us this website that it's essentially designed for students. Now, I just want to speak to our other campuses because I'm conscious that not everybody will be, of course, at the Gold Coast. We do know, that the highest number of our postgraduate students in are Gold Coast based, but I'm conscious that there are students in, of course, Lismore and at our Coffs campus, and also that you may be listening to this recording from your local area, and that may be, Rockhampton. So I'll talk through just a little bit about some of these roles, but also about how you would go about applying for this, and all my hints and tips more broadly about what would be helpful in terms of actually nailing one of these jobs so that it will be helpful for you guys, no matter where you are. So if I were you in this space, I would enjoy. I think one of the wonderful themes for today is, I think it was a point that was raised by both Mohit and Sharon, directly and indirectly, around not having to be really sort of singular minded in terms of, well, I'm studying, early childhood, or I'm studying business, and then therefore I can't, work in a support role for this, or what employers recognize, particularly if you haven't worked for a period of time. Certainly everybody that I have seen who then navigates and goes on to achieve what they more broadly want to achieve in their professional lives, those as students that transition through and beyond, is that they do a range of things, and Mohit, he highlighted that in terms of his internal activities. But again, I know some of you guys may not have access to a campus and may not yet, for whatever reason, want to even embark on part-time jobs. So the same principles could apply in terms of looking for volunteer positions. Now, volunteering is just, and I know we're here to talk about part-time work, and I'll swing right back to that in 2 secs. When we're thinking about our resumes and our cover letters, if you think about it from an employer's perspective, is that they read, they read less of them because, and I'll talk about that towards the very end, is that AI, essentially a bot, is reading your resume long before a human reads it. But when a human does read your resume and your cover letter, you want them to, you want to surprise them, delight them, intrigue them. And those other things that we do in our lives tell a story. That might seem a bit kind of like, oh yeah, whatever. But you've got to think about it from the employer's perspective, as Sharon highlighted today. She talked about, who she connects with at work, and those mutual values. And one of the big things that we talk about, so in November, I'll run, we run it every year, is a whole workshop on what we call career success. And it's it's a 2-hour workshop. And we talk about all the elements of finding work and our careers. And one of the things that we talk about in there is values. And so what is important, and our values, some of our values don't change, our bigger values, perhaps around, family and security and what have you. How does that relate to volunteering and part-time work? There's a lot of science coming out around purpose, meaning in the coaching space, in the positive psychology space. And there is a lot of stuff around doing what we love, doing what we enjoy, and how that impacts both our well-being and how that impacts our success, our level of motivation, our connection to others. Of course, connection to others is linked to well-being, et cetera, et cetera. So I try to think about careers very holistically, and what we're doing outside of our study, and how we're living our lives. And so volunteering is an amazing way to get some rungs on the board. And of course, part-time work. Now, initially, what I've seen, back to what I was saying before, sometimes students have had to, I've observed, they've had to sort of take work that is not necessarily their ideal. You don't necessarily have to do that, but it can be helpful just, having multiple pronged approach, that for a short period of time, you might take a role that's a sales assistant and you're studying education. The point being is that you will, get money in the bank, which helps you live a little more freely, a little more easily, but you get to meet people. You get to build, one of the first things Sharon said was our communication skills. And so it gives you that chance to talk to people in a public space, in a workplace. And I'm conscious that, you know, locked up in our homes for a couple of years, we're all just like ducks finding way out again. And to learn how to engage with others in a workplace, to respond, to work, to collaborate, to solve problems. And so much of work today is about solving problems. So as a sales assistant, you will be solving problems. Yes, there'll be different problems to what you'll be solving as an early childhood educator, or different, you know, if you're working as a, you know, software engineer. However, learning how to work through the problem, you know, problem solving approaches, how to think together creatively, how to work with, you know, with challenging customers, because as a sales assistant and as a software engineer, somewhere along the line, there'll still be others that you are working with. So I'm a huge advocate for I know that we get taught a lot about being really you know, that we have to get high grades, but we also need to attend to those other areas of our lives. So if I was going to apply for one of these jobs, the first thing, and unfortunately I can't show you, the first thing I would, and people naturally do this, you open up one of these, but what I would be doing very, very importantly is thinking about when you read it, how you feel. Might seem a little bit odd, but how do you feel? How do you respond to that advertisement? Is it well written? Do they have? Are they clear about what your requirements are? And it's wonderful that Mo suggested this particular site, because he said it. These have been checked by their staff members within a staff member within their organisation, which is great, because it for our students, you know, your students, I know we've got one of our participants here today, some of our students have already got a huge amount of work experience, but then also we have others that don't really know what jobs look like. So, and what to look out for. So just a few things that I would suggest looking out for when you do open up one of these jobs, or if you're looking on Seek, Jora, Indeed, Career One, ethicaljobs.com. Some of those, like Jora, or certainly ethicaljobs.com, might be a good one for graduate positions. Seek's really good, is a really good go-to across the board. Start building your LinkedIn. We'll run a session next term, November, on LinkedIn. And I've just got a bit distracted thinking about LinkedIn. I've been gathering a couple of really insightful posts that have been coming up around some great tips for LinkedIn that I'm going to be adding to our next series. And I guess it's a really good example of you know, these tips have come through you know, other professionals in my field on LinkedIn. You won't find so much part-time jobs in that arena. I would stick to these, but also the other place. And I recognised before earlier that through part-time, through our network. So just really quickly, the way that we look for work is the opposite way that employers look for employees. So we naturally tend to jump to, because it's less confronting, we'll go to Seek or any other online platform, and we'll look for a job. But employers actually, when they're filling short-term, casual, part-time, temporary positions, they literally kind of holler up and down the hall, and then they ask the team around them. And this is across so many professions, just about every profession that I can think of, except for even short term. I was going to say except for government contracts. I'm having a bit of a giggle because there's some issues publicly around some of that. But the short term, some of those roles that don't need to be advertised, people holler up and down the hall. So letting your network know, and students often think that their network is pretty small, but if you actually start to make a list of all the people that you know, you'd actually be surprised how many people you know. If you want to start building that network for additional opportunities around part-time, casual, temporary work, of course, come along to our LinkedIn session and start. We'll work through building that LinkedIn avenue. Volunteering is a great way to build your part-time job network, temporary work. But your landlords, other students, if you're on campus or have, study groups, they're always really good place to see who's working. Friends of friends, family, the network. They say actually 85% of jobs are not advertised, which is a huge proportion and percentage of jobs. Now, and so it's actually, as I said, the opposite way that we look for work is the opposite way that employers. And I know I'm always kind of like almost cringe myself when I tell people that they have to go through their network, because it's kind of it's really uncomfortable, and it's a lot easier if we're looking for work is to be really passive about it. And I say that because, I get it. I totally get it. But the only thing that I'm really conscious of and again, understand is our mindset around our capacity to get the work and achieve the things that we want, and also our mindset around even getting a part-time job. And so what we can do when we look for part-time work online, we can start building a story, go, oh, there's no jobs for me. Oh, there's too many qualifications that I need. I don't have the right qualifications. I haven't got I can't get there because I don't have the right transport. And we do that with graduate positions. We do that when we're in the middle of our career. We do that, if we've had to suddenly look for work because of redundancy or illness or being made unexpectedly out of work for whatever reason, businesses close down, and then our mindset. So that mindset can also happen when we're looking for part-time work. Okay, so there's no jobs close enough to me, the public transport. So when we have that really passive approach, we can just have we can sabotage, have a really nice, a nice little story that we play in our heads over and over and over again. And what I have observed, I don't know who's listening at home, a big shout out to you guys, but what I have actually have evidence of, and we got one today with came up on LinkedIn, one of our PhD students, that when students actually engage and do the things that we suggest in here, there's a really quick response to them actually getting the work that we want. So last term we had a student that came along, and this is not necessarily like you have to come and sit in here and all the classes, listen up, but just if you can take on some of the suggestions, particularly around mindset, whether it's part-time work, because I see that, and then I have seen when we can shift our mindset about whatever story it is. I don't have enough skills. I don't have the right qualifications. They don't employ international students. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm the wrong gender. etc., etc. I have a disability. There is so many, and I find that most people have some sort of barrier to achieving, and it's not necessarily the same barrier that the employer has. We've decided that they won't employ us for the reason that we've decided for ourselves. So what I've found is that students that come along to the sessions, and perhaps something lands for them that shifts that mindset or that belief that they have about themselves, and that they've been carrying into interviews for part-time jobs, or casual jobs or graduate positions or whatever it is. And once the penny drops there, that, they don't know, they're not looking for, they don't know that, I'm not good at administration or whatever it is, that the thing that you've been worried about being found out about. And so I was just going to quickly share with you, because I know that we had a couple of education students. We had a great, you're great. Love it. Love working with you guys. We had a postgraduate education student last term, and she came along to, I think we only ran 3. She came along to all 3 sessions, and she does it relate to part-time work? Yes, because you could take the same approach immediately if you're an education student, or even IT student. She already had a LinkedIn. She made some improvements to her LinkedIn. She'd been out on placement. I know that IT students, you've got that option to go onto placement. You've got the option to do professional development for the workplace. So I look forward to meeting you again in that unit. And what she did, she was essentially proactive in her approach. And one of the things that I observed when Mohit, who was just in the session before, talked about his experience and how he came to get his part-time job and how he's gone on to be successful, is that he's actually taken charge of several situations which has actually impacted the outcome. So if we track back the part-time job at the Marriott, he turned up to a networking event, and he had a conversation with someone. Now, I know that, if you're in regional Australia or, another city in Western Australia, yes, you can't come onto the campus, but you can look out for any, there's all sorts of like Eventbrite, there's all sorts of community, just about every community in Australia has something going on all of the time, even the smaller communities. So there's things like the Lions Club. There are council websites that will connect you to local volunteers. There's visitor centres. There are sometimes libraries have, they'll show opportunities. Libraries will often advertise little social clubs and places where that you can meet people that are then working in that community that can then help you connect to part-time jobs. So if you are living, rural or remote, some of those touch points within the community, the visitor centres, the Lions clubs, the Toastmasters, which is a debating club. Most smaller areas have Toastmasters, and they are places. But also the time that we're in at the moment, the good old-fashioned, people are putting ads up in their windows for part-time jobs. So again, if you're rural or remote, you probably will find we have a skills shortage in Australia post-pandemic, which is fantastic for our postgraduate students and our looking for part-time work, because there are so many positions. And you can see just at the sample of if we look at the suite of different sorts. So we've got an education institution here. We've got another education institution. We've got retail just on the screen in front of us. And then we have got a hotel based role, or it might be retail, that bottom one there. So the sectors that are absolutely desperate for staffing at the moment, and there is an event coming up for those of you at the Gold Coast. We'll send out, I'll share it with Alison from the Postgraduate Association, tourism and hospitality event coming to the Gold Coast early October. Mo's going to send through the details for that. And that is employers coming and looking for staff, and they are absolutely desperate. And I will share with you that prior to the pandemic, so around 2018, 2019, and the pandemic started in 2020, is that we had the opposite, where students couldn't even get voluntary work. So it is an amazing time. You've got a lot more power. There is talk, and it is happening, where they are paying more for casual and part-time work, and there is slow but significant changes happening in education. New South Wales government has just agreed to increase teachers' wages. Last night, there's some negotiations around nurses and midwives that are changing, and I'm hearing anecdotally that they are increasing casual wages, so if you don't undervalue yourself, I think that's something that can happen if you have a fear around a disability or an age or a gender or anything else to do with your cultural identity, anything that you may believe limits you. What I find that people can do, whether you feel like you're too old or too young, is that because we sort of carry that in, then I find that people will not be assertive enough to make sure that they get the right pay for the right work. And there's a bit of a campaign, the federal government, around fair pay, fair work, and then they'll also accept conditions at work. Our more vulnerable people, like our migrants, international students, our elderly, LGBTQI, that they'll accept conditions at work that are perhaps not suitable, not safe, but also not paid appropriately. So I want to, reassure you that if you are our postgraduate student, I love working with our post, because I know that, to take the time, spend the money, and to reinvest, you are motivated. And one of the things that employers want the most, no matter who, they want people who are motivated. Which brings me to a nice segue in terms of, how do you stand out as you apply for one of these positions, a sales assistant, casual educator? How do you stand out from the crowd? One of the things, and I always giggle, I always have a little quiet giggle to myself when I think about how simple this information is, but how we can almost miss it. Now, if you're going to have an interview face-to-face or online, is enthusiasm. So we had in a previous role with the university in the careers space, we used to have an organisation, a great company called Feros Care. They're an aged care provider on the Gold Coast. They employ our students in a range of different positions. One of our students, she's actually just left there. She stayed with them for a number of years I think she was in learning and development, but she didn't start in learning and development. I think she was a business student. She started in just in an entry business admin role. She just left there, and she's gone to another organisation, but she had a fantastic, so it would have been about maybe 5 or 6 years with them. They're a great organisation, and 2 years in a row, 2 different staff members, when I asked them, what is it, when you're employing our students for part-time entry-level positions, what do you look for? And both of them said enthusiasm. And it's like, because what happens is once you get to the interview stage of the process, and in that career success workshop that we've got coming up in November, I'll talk in more detail about cover letters and resumes. But at the very end of this session, I will share, or no, I won't be able to share, but I will tell you, and I can type it into the chat box, some resources that are fantastic that you might want to play around with before the next session. But they said the main thing that they looked for was enthusiasm. And when we go for the interview, they're checking. They know that you can do the job because they've assessed you. They may have even done a pre-screening. You know, do you have your working with, double checking that you've got your working with children's check, your police clearance, whatever those sort of formal requirements may be. But then when they get down to it and they've got 5 or 10 of you, they're looking at who you are as a person, and how you express yourself, how you connect with them. And what I have found, I have to say it is the area that I find students struggle the most, and they also equally spend the least amount of time preparing. And in some ways that's not too bad because, you know, your odds are a lot higher, you know, one in 10. However, you don't want to be that person that keeps going for job interviews and then you know, you keep missing out and you don't know why. So one of the things is enthusiasm, enthusiasm, enthusiasm. And I was listening to somebody in the careers space, and they were talking about online interviews, and they really nailed what I have observed in many instances over the last couple of years, really with the focus of practicing in this online space, you know, particularly with COVID, and it's easy for recruiters to do the online recruitment, is that they said something that I had noted, but I wouldn't have been able to actually, I could see it, but wouldn't have thought to make the link. So they said that they were talking about showing your hands, physically showing your hands in the first minute. And the reason why, I wish I could remember where I heard it, was that it was actually something really interesting to do with human beings and human nature. And it actually goes back to kind of our primitive, it shows trust. That if because we're essentially, you know, we're animals, we're primed, we're wired to survive, essentially. And they said by showing your hands early on in the interview that it built trust and rapport between the two. Those weren't the exact words that they used, but essentially that sense of safety. And I thought, and when I've been, you know, I'm always saying, you know, show your enthusiasm and certainly to show your hands, but I've never actually said to people within that very first period, and hadn't really understood its connection to that sense of safety and because I know that's what they said, that we're primed, and so if you can't see somebody's hand, there's this you know, this fear that I'm going to come out with a big dagger. So I thought that was really really interesting. Let me know as I'm going along if you've got, Alan, if you've got any questions, anything, any comments, anything that you've had a fabulous career, anything, any particular areas of concern, areas that you'd like me to highlight, because again, what I have found, the questions that I get asked. In fact, that the lady that got the education job, she became I was talking about what she did on LinkedIn. Got a bit sidetracked. So on LinkedIn, she connected. She'd done some placement with some schools, and she particularly wanted to work at, she really enjoyed her experience with one of the schools. And you could do the same whether you're in IT, whether you're in early childhood. She was in, I think from memory, primary ed. She had a background in, she had a farming background, and she was combining her kind of love, her interest, her passion around agriculture and education in that ag space, and she'd put that up into her LinkedIn. She already had a pretty good network, but again, it wasn't necessarily, it was to do, that's not fair. And I was going to say, well, yes and no. Because she had the farming background, but she'd also been actively involved in some community programs around agriculture and some associations. And I forget where she's living in Tasmania. So anyway, as we went through the career success series workshops last term, she came along each week, and she was great. She had lots and lots and lots of questions, which was fantastic because she got what she needed, obviously, because she did actually get a job immediately. So I think it was about a week or so after the final workshop. But what she did was she wrote directly to the assistant principal, or she asked to connect with him on LinkedIn. She wrote him a really, friendly, and then she basically just said, look, anytime you need me, I'm here. And he wrote back immediately, said, come in. She got the job. Too easy. And it's too easy, and it isn't easy, but in many ways it's a lot. That process was a lot easier than her sitting at home for hours and hours and days and days and days of like writing down all the schools in Tasmania that might be ag centres, and then going through and checking whether she liked them and their values. She knew where she'd had a really good experience. She knew where she'd felt she'd done placement. And that's the great thing for those of you guys that have got built-in placement. But I'd also really, really encourage you, if you haven't had placement, well, first, before all of that, if you're new to or if you're re-entering the workforce and you've had an illness, you've been out of work for accident, injury, whatever, COVID, start, and then your confidence is a bit is low or not, or whatever, what first place can be really good is volunteering. It gets you get your sea legs again, get you back out, get you out of your jammies, get out there. Any part-time, and then that then gives you a little bit more confidence, particularly if you're recovering from anything. There's so many people that I'm conscious of that may have returned to study, but they may not have been out working. Volunteering is just such a nice, safe way. Get the part-time, then that leads to a nice part-time job. But the other thing, and I'm thinking here more broadly about your resume, is that a little bit of volunteering that makes up less than a third of your resume. A part-time job that can go a half a page at the back, and then you can have, depending on all the other ththings or where you're at, depending on how much study you've done, how much other, that can be the whole one other page. So then you've got yourself, if you started, they say, and there's a great motivational speaker that I absolutely love, probably not people that everybody be interested in, but there's a lady called Mel Robbins in America, and she covers a lot of topics around careers, well-being, and business and entrepreneurial, which kind of can feed into and be helpful across many things. And one of the things that she says is just start today. And also just taking those baby steps. But I think I'm always really excited because once I know people are connected here and they're listening, step one, and then like setting really small goals, like, okay, I'm going to just work on half of that cover letter, and setting a little timer, for half an hour, and then perhaps, looking at volunteering, etc. So when I went off on another one of my little tangents there, I was thinking about looping a little bit back to the role of internship, because, if you're new back, returning to space, new in Australia, transitioning into a totally new career, you can actually rebuild that through volunteering, and that volunteering may or may not need to be in your sector. Then a part-time job, if you're really specific about where like it's education, IT, and you want to immediately get into that profession, that is probably ideal. But if that feels like too much of a leap, you start in retail, start in cleaning. One of our guest speakers last year was another international student, and he'd had a fantastic work experience also in India, and he taught me so much. He was actually going to one of our speakers that was going to come along today, but it had clashed with his work. Taught me so much about resilience, but also not taking thank you so much, not taking things personally. And I loved how he did that. So he came to Australia, and so he's now, I think, the general manager or the acting general manager of a resort in Tasmania. And he started in the pancake shop in Coolangatta. And that was quite a step down for him, because he'd done an undergraduate degree. He'd been in wholesale tourism roles in India, but he knew here in Australia, well, it's not necessarily knew that he had to do it, but at that time it wasn't a very buoyant employment market for students. So this is at the same time as Mohit, so around 2014, 13, around that era. And so he just went, and he got a lot of rejections before he got the pancake job. Okay, I'll come to awesome. Thanks, Ellen. I'll have a read of that. Thank you for sharing. I'll have a read of that in a sec. And he got a job in the pancake shop. But before he got the job in the pancake shop, he had a ton of rejections. And I just always remember him, he'd just kind of go, no skin off my nose. And I was just like, I love that. If we could all just approach it like that, and he'd just go back out there again. And so he got a job in the pancake shop, and in the pancake shop he got a job in was a 4-star hotel. There might have been a job in between that. Got himself a job in a 4-star hotel, and then because he was studying tourism, he was able to bring his tourism stuff in. Then he did internship, and then I think he stayed with, I think it was the Mantra. He spent a number of years with the Mantra, and then he did something else really clever, which is a very, very clever thing to do if you're looking to move quickly, and if you want to. So what he did, and it's certainly something that I personally have experienced as being beneficial, you go offshore, or you go remote, or you go rural, or you go and do something unset, you go to not necessarily to the mines, but you go somewhere that other people don't want to go to do the same work. And then you can get more rungs on the board, out to Mount Isa. Unfortunately, these days, it is a lot more difficult. I remember Europeans have complained that Australians are not very, they're not very mobile in terms of being willing to relocate. And it's a shame now, because I think many people would love to relocate, but the cost of relocating. But if you've got friends or family or somewhere where you can get having said that, employers are so desperate these days to get people into these rural and remote locations like far north Queensland. They were in some of the hotels up there. They're back to the kind of the good old days where you get a lot of benefits for going into those. I know that certainly in the education sector, even in my profession, actually, I noticed they were looking for people to relocate out to the University of Armidale, and they're paying full relocation fees, and that wouldn't have happened, pre-pandemic. And so that's something. It's a really clever thing to think about more broadly. But so he got his part-time job, because I'm conscious we're here to look at a part-time job. How did he get that part-time job? By just keeping getting back out there. He had lots of help from the careers team, but he did the work as well. So he kept, and I'll share the careers team stuff. And he just kept refining, and he just kept getting back out there. And then he got his next part-time job. His next part-time job was with the Marriott. And then that became his internship position. And then he stayed with the Marriott, and then he relocated. And that was where I was at. He relocated to Tasmania. And that was really helpful because as a migrant, there were particular destinations that he could choose from, I think from memory, and that worked really well for him. I know 2 students actually that relocated and have done really well from through tourism and hospitality, through relocating to Tasmania. It was both, the 2 of them was in that same era. One of them is now back, but it worked brilliantly. One of them is now back on the Gold Coast. He's actually in student experience education, in business education. So that's fantastic as well. Let me have a read of this. Oh, good. Oh, I'm so pleased. That's useful for me to know. Oh, okay. So are you an international student, Alan? Oh, amazing. Where are you from? Wow. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yes. So it's a great, what I would when you get a little bit, and whereabouts are you located most important? Where are you located most importantly? So we can kind of help with that element of it. Where are you studying and living at the moment? Oh, you're in Sarajevo at the moment? Oh, how is it that that you're studying? Do they let people study online? I thought you had to be based here. Oh, no way. I actually didn't know that. Oh, so tell me more about your plan, like your vision with studying. I actually, because things change so quickly, I didn't know that they offered that program for international students. Oh yeah, I'd say you are. Um, that's a really, really good question. And tell me, what would you like to, obviously you're thinking about immigrating to Australia? Oh, okay, cool. So not at the moment. All right. Okay, cool. And so so looking, Yeah, so I think one of the things, and it's certainly an area that I'd like to so stand by. Alan, I was thinking about this last week. Is that for me, there's a gap in my, be really frank and open, there's gap in my knowledge around I know that there is a huge space and a huge place for online roles in IT. But I've actually got a colleague who's just come to mind, and he's in the career space in IT. And I'd really like to get back to you on, it came up for me last week. We had a student here. She is studying here, but I'm conscious that there's a whole other online world there for IT. No, it's okay, because you are still one of our students. And so the principles, it doesn't matter for me whether you're, based in Hong Kong or Switzerland or whatever. You are still one of our postgraduate students. You're a full fee paying a student, and the principles are the same in that, whether you're in Sarajevo or in Sweden, is that it's about like finding online work in that IT space, and there's a whole world there that it's just really highlighted for me that I need to, particularly because we're getting more and more MIT postgraduate students. And so, yeah. So those, because I know for a fact that there is a whole other world where people can have perfectly suitable work related to their profession, no matter where they're located. And I just don't have I often have a list of where the employers are in access to those, and I don't have one for remote. I've gathered a few for some of those local ones around that IT space. So stand by, because I will get back to you on that, because I'm also involved with the MIT students on campus, and I think it's really highlighted for me that there is really a bit of a gap there. And so I'll put together, it'll take me a little bit of time, put together as much as I can some details about where there can be some of those potential opportunities. So stand by on that one. Yeah, good one. And again, it's quite fortuitous that, because not realizing, I should have just asked you, because we have so many of our Gold Coast students, and I just make all sorts of assumptions that that people are close to the Gold Coast, because so many of them are. Great feedback and great points. Well, welcome. So how's the weather there? That's what we always ask, isn't it? Oh, nice. Lovely. Yeah, it's pretty nice here today too, actually. All right, well, I'll go for another, say, 15 minutes. And just in case, I'm always conscious that you've been so wonderful joining us here, and I hope that it's been helpful. All of those, I know there'll be different cultural issues, of course, with, where you are, but I think that a lot of those principles will be the same for you around, your network. And I talked about happenstance. And happenstance is thanks, Alan. I really appreciate that you've stayed for a long session. Happenstance is one of my colleagues. It was her favorite theory, and I love. It's a career theory, and essentially it just means that lucky people aren't just lucky; they do something. And often we don't need to do. So if you think about just Mohit's example, he didn't actually. He said, "Oh, I was lucky that this happened," and people often say, "Oh, then this happened, then I was lucky." But then if you actually track back, they were actually engaged somewhere in that process. So they got out of their car and then they were just, standing and waiting for a coffee, and then they chatted to someone. And then oddly enough, that person happened to be. And so that is really, that in its simplicity is the theory of happenstance that can be applied anywhere. It's in the supermarket, it's in those small interactions, it's in the gym, it's with the reception desk, at the library, and that chatting and finding commonality and finding connection. Of course, that helps to well-being. And that can be applied wherever you go. And every student that I have worked with that, I see them happy in their careers, that they've been kicking their goals, is that they've been really active in that process. And I think what can happen is that we can think that, oh, it's happening, she got that job because of this, or he got that opportunity because of that. But you probably find that there's something that they're actually doing that's contributing to them, living. It's a bit of a buzzword here in Australia at the moment, living their best life. The other one in Australia, being the best version of oneself. But either way, they're taking action, and action is really reaching out and moving towards those things that we want to do. So just a few things I'd like to cap on, and they may be different for you, Alan, in terms of whether you include cover letters and resumes and those sorts of things. I know most countries around the world use resumes. Here in Australia, we use a 2-page resume. For part-time work, you can use a really snappy 1-pager. I've seen some really nice ones. You want to put your qualifications on there first. You want to put on any relevant experience. Initially, you'll put any experience. Sometimes we just have to put all our, any rungs that we've got on the board to just start, building our careers. As you progress and you get the next part-time job, it's slightly better than the other one, you get an internship position, etc., you'll find that you can refine the approach that you take. And I would strongly suggest that you do that by tailoring your application. So if you're particularly interested in software engineering, or whether it's data analytics, that you put some of those details up the top of your resume, graduate specializing in XYZ, so that, and certainly in your taglines for your LinkedIn. Love to connect with you, Alan, on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn is you'll be able to find me under background. I think it's probably background careers. So, oops, lost myself in that. Oh. Hello, am I still there? Can you hear me? Oh, I'm here. Oh, gosh, sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I'd accidentally I was trying to turn the phone off for me. My sincerest apologies. I was talking about Alan, what was I talking about? Oh, background. Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. Beautiful. Thank you. Love to connect. Anybody at home, I love to hear from you. Reach out and let's connect on LinkedIn. It's a great way. I often share, well, I say often, just when things come up, if I see jobs for other people that I know on there and opportunities, I'll send it through you in the little chat box there. And I love to see where you're going and to keep, to follow your progress on LinkedIn. I know what I wanted to finish up with. I wanted to talk to you as a final, this will be helpful for you, Alan, you're such a stayer, I really appreciate it, is the SCU Careers team. So this session is brought to you by the Postgraduate Association and SCU Careers. And the SCU Careers team live at each campus, but also they're in a virtual space as well. And they can help you with your cover letters, your resumes, mock interviews. They have some wonderful resources for you. www.scu/careers. And if you go on there and you log into their career hub, in the career hub space there, you can make appointments. There's a little tab right up the top, and normally I would show you in here. There's a tab up the top once you get in there, and there's a drop box. The tab is called applications, and if you drop down in there, there's a tab there for our international students, some great resources in there. They also have, I'm pretty sure they probably have one for IT. They have resume like samples for industry specific occupations, which is really helpful because they've been designed to be representative like of what industry wants in those particular professions, which is excellent. Now, here are a few resources that I would really suggest on top of what they have there. Resume Worded. So the gentleman that I was talking about that worked in the pancake shop here in Australia, his wife immigrated recently from Australia, and she'd been here for a while, was having trouble finding work, and I run just some pro bono sessions for graduates that's been out for a while, and a few people around my network, a handful of sessions a few times a year. I had a session with her, and Resume Worded, that particular website changed things was shortly after that. So I think maybe 6 months. She'd had a while of not being able to find work. She was highly professional. We talked quite a lot about tailoring application. We talked a lot about mindset, networking, all those sorts of things. But Resume Worded, she said, was one of the tools that really, really helped her, because you put, this would be great for anybody looking for part-time work, internship roles, graduate positions, if PhD students, next week we've got our PhD session, anybody looking for work, drop your resume into Resume Worded. It's free. I have no affiliation with the organisation, except that, a few years ago, I had wasn't the beginning of sort of 2021, had a period where my circumstances changed really unexpectedly. And it was really helpful because it gave me a chance to, play around with different tools, and also psychologically to experience and I've always had compassion for people finding work, but, to really live that experience again after a long period of time. And I knew I used, what I did do, which was really interesting. I used a lot of human beings in the process, my own team professionals, and I actually found that the combination of humans giving you feedback, and then also because bots read all of your applications now, so Career One, www Career One, Seek we use here in Australia, but they actually have some really good resume templates. And the reason I would suggest using the SCU career templates or the templates from Seek or this organisation is, again, I have no affiliation with it, but this is, I've personally and with other students have had the best success with this one. Resumes as template from Hayes in Sydney. They're a recruitment company. They're in the business. They've been around forever. And the reason you need to love on the machines and on the people is because a huge amount of the process of culling candidates is done through the bots. And so, but so many people, I would say 90% of the Australian population don't realise how much of it's done by bots. And until embarking on that experience myself personally, I knew bots were doing it, but I hadn't realised to what extent. And so you do need to, and that's why Resume Worded is really helpful, because, this will be the future as well. You can use other tools like ChatGPT, AI, and perhaps into the future. In fact, I will talk to Alison about into the future talking about AI and careers, and maybe two-pronged. The first bit around all the issues around, getting through the hoops with AI, and then also jobs, what jobs, all of the changes around what's happening in the workspace around AI. That's a little bit off on a tangent. Resume Worded is brilliant because you drop your resume in there and it gives you a score. And several of my colleagues are, amazing professionals, got an average of about 56% dropping resumes in there. And so you do need that combination of human beings, and then you just got to go and do the work, make the tweaks. The good thing is you can put it may have changed. I don't think it has, but you can actually you don't have to pay a membership or a fee for Resume Worded. You can drop your resume in there and just drop it in there for fun and see how you go. Drop it in there 12 times, I think. You can get it up to about 85% without having to pay for the premium. And then the last final things, like it wants you to have, they suggest having no referees on there. We suggest, based on feedback more broadly from industry, having referees on there. So that's a percentage, and I can't remember what the other, and there's another kind of anomaly that's really just a choice thing. around there. But what it gets you to do, it gets you to change the metrics so that you've got much more specific achievements. You've got much more powerful words that you're using to describe your actions, but also it forces you to go achievements, achievements, achievements. So everything that you have achieved in your professional life, in your sporting life, in your community life, etc. So there's some of my favorite. So we've got SCU now. Career One. And again, I use this myself in that period. They have a human being free service that will review your resume. But then they will also have a bot that reviews it as well. And I would suggest both, because you get different feedback from the human. And the human in Career One is really looking at it from a different level to perhaps the way your friends and family, because they may already have some kind of whereas the human that looks at it through, a third party. The other option, of course, who are amazing, is our SCU careers team. I would still strongly suggest getting the bots to tell you whether they like it or not, and using that combination of both. And again, that's only from my own experience. And I was getting several and I actually saw it was like night and day. So I'd had the humans looking at it, and then I was just kind of like, oh, wow, how am I in the business and not getting hits here? And so then I had to really do exactly what I suggest to all of our students, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to get the same result. So if something is not working and you're not happy that it's not working, you have to do something different. And then as soon as, and I have seen that when I have sessions with people, and then in particular, whether it's something shifts in their mind, they start to think differently. And then we start to think differently, we start to behave differently. And then also if we start to take a different approach in terms of how we look for work, how we show up, etc., you'll find that the outcome will be significantly different. Or certainly that's been my experience, working with students over the years. And also it was my personal experience by using the bots. As I said, I'll talk to Alison probably next year will be a really good time, because there's so much to collect from even from the beginning of this year to September, how much AI has already, AI is not new per se. It's been in our world. It's just its profile has raised its head, even since January of this year. So look out for that session. So next week, just for those of you guys that perhaps might be listening at home, Alison mentioned that we've got our Postgraduate Association offering our final workshop in this series on PhDs for a career session for those that are looking and interested in work outside of the PhD, outside of tertiary education, formally teaching and so forth, other opportunities. So come along if that's relevant. You're listening at home, that's relevant for you guys. In November, I think we're planning to run 3 or 4 workshops, and they're our standard workshops that we run every. We ran them, I think it was May, and that we do cover letters, resumes, interviews, and career success workshops. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience in terms of not being able to have the right visuals here. I can't say I've ever, I don't think I've ever not been able to share when I've had privileges before. That's a first for me, but I appreciate that, Alison, and I appreciate audience here and our amazing guest speakers. Keep in touch. Alan, lovely to have you here with us. And it's almost the weekend. I know that everybody has, some people work weekends, and, some people's weekend starts in the middle of the week. Wherever you are at, I hope that the rest of your Friday afternoon is fabulous. Or what time of the day is it there? It might be like 5 o'clock in the morning. Or let me guess, 9 o'clock at night. Oh, I think that was my first guess, wasn't it? 4 o'clock in the morning. No, it's not, is it? Oh, even better. Oh. Well, sending you big warm wishes from the land down under. Thank you. It's been fabulous having you here, and thanks to Alison and Craig and the team of the Postgraduate Association for having me here. Thanks, Alan. Take good care. We are here to help you. I'll pop my email address in here at the end. I'll have a chat. I think we'll probably do it again at the end of every one of these series. So the last one is next week, as I said, but I offer one-on-one Zoom sessions with students here. We do an hour's session, and it's all about you. You just tell me where you're struggling, what's worrying you, what you need help with, and I tailor that session around your needs. I think that over the past 80 or 90, I'd say 85%, haven't had a lot this year. So we've been doing it to the end of this year. It'll be 2 years that we've been running these together. And of all those one-on-one sessions, I think it's about 80 or 85% of students have got what they wanted. So please, if that is something it's helpful that you'd like to book in, just shoot me an email. I'm sure we can arrange something. It's beckbrowncareers@gmail.com. beckbrowncareers@gmail.com. Happy to help you however way we can. If you prefer coming into the workshops, getting the recordings, we'll be back with a full series in November if you're not a PhD student. All right, take care. Ciao. Ciao, ciao, ciao. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.